Very few cities in the world can carry the weight that the name Brussels bears. It is a city that has been burned, rebuilt, occupied, liberated, and reinvented, not once, not twice, but across 2,000 years of relentless history. It has stood at the crossroads of empires, absorbed the ambitions of conquerors, and emerged from every catastrophe, not merely surviving, but transformed. This is not just the story of a city. This is the story of a living organism, one that breathes, bleeds, and refuses to die. And on this journey, we will do something special. Using advanced artificial intelligence techniques, we have transformed ancient historical engravings and paintings into vivid, lifelike scenes, so that you will not just hear history, you will witness it, as close to reality as it has ever been possible. Welcome to Brussels, from swamp to the capital of Europe. Long before the grand boulevards and the gilded palaces, before the chocolate shops and the Gothic spires, this land was nothing more than a marshy island rising from the river Seine. It was the Romans who first recognized the strategic value of this soggy terrain, establishing a road network through what is today central Belgium as early as the 1st century AD. But Rome's presence here was fleeting, a shadow that passed over the marshland without taking root. It was not until the early medieval period that Brussels truly began to breathe. Around 580 AD, Saint Gogericus, the Bishop of Cambrai, constructed a small chapel on an island in the river Seine, and with that humble act, a city was born. The name itself tells the story, Bru Oxella, meaning settlement in the marsh in Old Dutch, a city named after mud, destined to become the heart of a continent. The true rise of Brussels began in the 10th century, when the powerful Counts of Leuven recognized the island's defensive potential. In 979 AD, Duke Charles of Lower Lorraine fortified the island settlement, and for the first time, Brussels had walls. And walls meant power. Over the following centuries, Brussels grew outward in rings, its population swelling with merchants, craftsmen, and pilgrims drawn to its position along the vital trade routes between Cologne and Bruges. The textile industry became the city's first great engine of wealth, and wealth attracted ambition, both from within and from far beyond the city's walls. By the 13th century, Brussels was already a city of tension, a battleground between the aristocracy and the rising merchant class, between those who held power and those who were beginning to demand it. The year 1302 shook the entire Low Countries to its foundation. At the Battle of the Golden Spurs, Flemish commoners, weavers and craftsmen annihilated the flower of French chivalry on a muddy field near Kortrijk. Brussels did not fight that battle, but its tremors were felt on every cobblestone street of the city. The power of the guilds surged, and for a brief electric moment, the common people believed that a new order was possible. But history is rarely so generous. The 14th and 15th centuries brought Brussels to perhaps its greatest medieval glory and its darkest shadows. Under the rule of the Dukes of Burgundy, Brussels became one of the most magnificent courts in all of Europe. Philip the Good made it his jewel, filling its halls with Flemish masters, Van de Weyden, Van Eyck, whose paintings would outlast every dynasty and every war. The city's skyline was pierced by the soaring Gothic tower of the town hall on the Grand Place, a structure so audaciously beautiful that it seemed almost to dare the heavens themselves. But even in the midst of splendor, the plague had visited. The Black Death swept through Brussels in the mid-14th century, killing perhaps a third of its population in a matter of months. The city wept in mass graves and empty streets, and then, as it always had, it rebuilt. With Burgundy came the Habsburgs, and with the Habsburgs came the weight of empire. By the early 16th century, Brussels found itself at the center of the greatest empire the world had yet seen. Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, King of Spain, ruler of the New World, chose Brussels as his preferred residence. The city that had risen from a swamp was now the administrative heart of an empire that stretched from the jungles of Mexico to the plains of Hungary. But empire is a hungry thing. When Charles abdicated in 1555 in a ceremony of heartbreaking pomp right here in Brussels, he handed his dominions to his son, Philip II of Spain. And with that handover, Brussels entered its most turbulent and blood-soaked chapter. The Spanish Netherlands became a crucible of religious war, political revolt, and spectacular brutality. When Philip II dispatched the Duke of Alba, the Iron Duke, to crush the Protestant rebellion in 1567, Brussels became a city of terror. The Council of Blood, as it came to be known, tried and executed thousands across the Low Countries. Noblemen were beheaded in the very Grand Place where merchants had once celebrated the city's prosperity. The streets, that had once echoed with the sounds of commerce now echoed with the sounds of fear. And yet, resistance grew. The Dutch revolt, which would eventually give birth to the modern Netherlands, had its roots in the fury that Brussels and its neighbouring cities felt during these years of iron oppression. The 17th century brought perhaps the most spectacular act of destruction in Brussels history. In August 1695, French forces under Marshal de Villeroy bombarded the city for 36 hours. Over 4,000 buildings were reduced to ash and rubble. The Grand Place, the beating heart of Brussels, was almost entirely destroyed. And what happened next is one of the most remarkable acts of collective will in urban history. Within 5 years, the guilds of Brussels had rebuilt the Grand Place entirely, not as a pale imitation of what had stood before, but as something more magnificent, more golden, more defiant. The Grand Place that stands today, that UNESCO World Heritage Site that takes your breath away, is the monument not to what was destroyed, but to the fury and pride of a city that refused to be erased. The 18th century brought new masters, the Austrian Habsburgs, and with them, a period of relative stability and Enlightenment thinking. Brussels absorbed the ideas of philosophers and reformers, its coffee houses buzzing with debates about liberty, reason, and the rights of man. But the French Revolution changed everything. When French revolutionary armies swept into Brussels in 1795, they absorbed the city into the French Republic, and for 20 years, Brussels was simply another French city, its churches stripped, its guilds dissolved, its identity subsumed beneath the tricolour flag. Napoleon himself walked these streets, and when he fell at Waterloo in June 1815, that battle was fought just a few kilometers south of the city he had claimed. The Congress of Vienna handed Brussels to the newly created Kingdom of the Netherlands, but the marriage was deeply unhappy. The Belgian and Dutch populations clashed over language, religion, and economic policy, and in August 1830, something extraordinary happened. A performance of an opera at the La Monnaie Theatre sparked a revolution. Crowds poured into the streets, barricades went up, and within weeks, Belgian revolutionaries had driven Dutch forces from the city. On October 4, 1830, Belgium declared independence, and Brussels became the capital of a brand new nation. A city born in a swamp had become the birthplace of a country. The 19th century transformed Brussels beyond recognition. King Leopold II, a man whose ambition was as immense as his cruelty, used the vast wealth extracted from the Belgian Congo to rebuild Brussels as a grand imperial capital. Massive boulevards were carved through medieval neighborhoods, grand parks were laid out, and monumental public buildings rose across the city. Brussels became one of the most beautiful and most contested cities in Europe. The Art Nouveau movement found one of its greatest expressions here, in the sinuous buildings of Victor Horta, whose organic forms seemed to grow from the city's streets like living things. And then came the wars. In August 1914, German armies marched into Brussels without resistance. The Belgian government had fled, and the city chose survival over martyrdom. For 4 years, Brussels endured occupation, food shortages, executions, the quiet heroism of ordinary people who hid resistors and passed messages beneath the noses of their occupiers. Women like Edith Cavell, a British nurse executed by the Germans in Brussels in 1915, became symbols of a resistance that refused to be extinguished. Liberation came in November 1918, and Brussels erupted in joy. But the nightmare would return. In May 1940, the Wehrmacht rolled into Brussels once more, and for 4 more years, the city endured. Underground networks, hidden Jews, whispered defiance, until September 1944, when Allied forces finally liberated the city and the streets once again ran with celebration and tears. The post-war decades brought Brussels a destiny that no one could have predicted. In 1958, the city hosted the World Exposition. The Atomium, that gleaming monument to atomic age optimism, rose on its outskirts and became an icon overnight. And as Europe began the long, painful, hopeful project of integration, Brussels found itself at its center. NATO relocated its headquarters here. The European Economic Community, predecessor to the European Union, chose Brussels as its home. The city that had been fought over by Burgundians, Habsburgs, Spanish dukes, French marshals, Dutch kings, and German armies was now the capital of a new kind of empire, one built not on conquest, but on cooperation. Today, Brussels is one of the most complex, contradictory, and captivating cities on earth. It is simultaneously the bureaucratic heart of Europe and one of the continent's most vibrant cultural capitals. It speaks 3 languages, French, Dutch, and German, within its borders. and dozens more on its streets. It is a city of Art Nouveau masterpieces and brutalist concrete, of world-class museums and chaotic comic strip murals, of Michelin-starred restaurants, and the greatest fries you will ever eat standing up in the rain. It is a city that was built on a swamp, burned to the ground, occupied by foreign armies, reinvented by revolutionaries, reshaped by kings, and ultimately claimed by an entire continent as its own. 2,000 years of survival, 2,000 years of reinvention, 2,000 years of a city that simply refuses, absolutely refuses, to be anything less than extraordinary. We'll see you in the past.